Folks, I'm One Proper Variant and I'm very excited today to talk about the Ottomans in EU5. I had a campaign that ran from 1337 all the way to 1700. I didn't quit because there was nothing to do anymore, but I quit because I was like, wow, I learned so much, I'm going to do a new campaign and then figure out what I learned here and try to kind of apply that rather than have it in a playthrough where I did so many things wrong already. I can tell you before we jump into this video, I want to tell you a bunch of things, but the first things first, as I went through my campaign and thought about it, I was like, yeah, wow, I did so many things wrong. It was kind of, I would describe it as board game mindset that I was applying there that doesn't necessarily hold because there are more steps to this, there are more cogs in, the machine right here that I should have considered. And so the way that I see it ultimately is that, yeah, I really did learn a lot from this playthrough, but I was also blind to a ton of lessons that I would only later on pick up in the actual English playthrough. This English playthrough I already talked about yesterday. You can check out that video. It is on the channel. Similar to that playthrough, the way that I talked about it, we're going to order this by the ages, so I will talk about what happened in ages in broad strokes, and we're going to discuss the way this worked out. We are also not doing play-by-play analysis. I personally don't care for that at all. Balancing will change things. You know how it is. All we're going to do here is we're going to talk about the systemic kind of underlying mechanics, the directions that were proposed to me, and then how I reacted to them, because I think that for me is the interesting part about this playthrough. So that is what we're going to get in this video right here. Now, the last few things that I want to mention before we jump straight in. The first thing is this will be the last playthrough overview for a bit. I need to do more playthroughs, basically. Other than that, I do have 2 more videos at the very least planned very, very soon in quick succession. The first one being about everything I dislike about EU5. I said this in the first video. There are a whole bunch of things that I dislike, and I like to talk about them. I think it's very important. I have surely never cursed as much as when playing EU5 in the initial hours of my time with the game. So I want to talk about this for sure as well, not in a polemic way, but rather in, hey, this is the way that I feel about it, this is the reason for this, and this is how it goes. Always with the caveat, I have put in close to 100 hours now. I'm having a really good time with the game, but yeah, a lot of the stuff is annoying me. The second video that I also really want to do is answering your questions. I will handpick the questions, of course. I can talk about everything just for the record, but I want to talk about the stuff that I think is most pressing, that is most interesting, so we're going to take a look at that for sure. What I also want to mention is my player type, because this is important to evaluate where your experience might differ, right? What you value versus what I don't value and so on. I am very much, I am somebody that has been playing grand strategy games for, oh my god, 2 decades. Yeah, I've started with Hearts of Iron 2, I played Victoria Revolutions, EU3 for the glory, I played all of those games, and at some point I just decided I don't really care about min-maxing anymore because I can't really lose against the AI anyway. What I'm going to do is I want to kind of have a playthrough that is unique, where my empire comes out with a very particular way, looking in an interesting fashion, be it, for example, multicultural, be it very top-down, whatever it might be. I'm interested in those things. I'm an empire builder, I'm they call it National Gardener these days, right? I like those things, which doesn't mean that what I like and what I talk about is useless if you're a min-maxer. I just want you to know that that is what I enjoy. If you enjoy something else, I hope that you get your enjoyment from this game and other games as well, but fundamentally I'm going to be slanted towards this direction without a doubt. Now, the last 2 things that I want to mention is something that came up in the comments a couple of times. How is performance? For that, I just want to very quickly say that I have a 7800X3D. This is the second best CPU that you can have for map games. The better one is just the 9800X3D, so the next generation, basically. And I am having a really good time with performance right here, obviously, because it's, one of the best in the market. 1337, if I just let it run, takes me about 37 seconds, which is an amazing, kind of number to come out there, I guess. And then the drop-off in terms of performance for me really isn't that significant. Yes, of course it drops off. There are more things that the game is doing. At that point, it will be about 52 seconds, so that is what I'm experiencing. It is a really well-running game for me. Is that indicative of anything? I don't think so, because, many things can change between launch. Obviously, we have a frozen version. I don't know what's still happening, but I don't think that really matters. I'm just letting you know I'm not struggling with this the way that I was, for example, struggling with Victoria 3 1.0. That was a game that really dropped off in performance. I am not experiencing this here. Yeah, just so you know. The other thing and the last thing that I want to talk about before we jump in is why am I not talking too much about flavor? The reason for this is that I want to talk about flavor a lot in the video of everything I dislike about EU5, and I'm kind of saving that for that element. I like a lot of the flavor, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more for the Ottomans right here. I, for example, experienced the Janissary coup, but I like flavor that is mechanically embedded. General flavor, honestly, I don't care that much about it. That's the nicest thing that I can say about it in this game. Again, we're going to talk about this in a separate video. So I'm going to kind of bracket that out. What we really care about here today is the systemic stuff that is going on in a playthrough, things I noticed, things that I misjudged, how things play out on a general broad strokes level, because that is indeed a test for the systems, a test for the design of EU5, and what I personally find the most interesting. With that being said, let's just jump straight in. We're going to start with the ages of tradition and, of course, Renaissance. I'm going to skip over the Black Death. Yep, the Black Death was pretty rough. It definitely screwed me over, but it screws everybody over, so, you know, there you go. As the Ottomans, you have a lot of flavor, especially on a mechanical level. You get government reforms, you can see it right here, the Guzat, the Ulama, the Burghers, the commoners, the Zimmi, they all exist and they all impact you in a way that is relatively unique compared to other countries, of course. I think what I want to highlight in that context, you can see you got fratricide going on right from the start right there, I think at least right from the start. What I found really interesting, and I only realized this in this post-game analysis that I did for this video, where I was like, hey, how did this game actually go? I didn't at the time, so I started this playthrough, just for the record, because I said to myself, I want to just do war, I want to stress test the system, I want to see how it goes, I want to see how it plays when you blob a lot, what is the difference versus not blobbing a lot, and yeah, so the Ottomans are in a position where they can integrate provinces very quickly, because they get benefits from it, and while you're integrating, you have a chance of triggering a really beneficial event as well. So this is just the name of the game for the Ottomans. You don't really go around and do much with vassals, at least not in Anatolia and Greece, because you can just annex it, right? This is the situation that you're in. You also get pretty much free claims. It's not really free claims, but you get this via this Rise of the Turk situation right there. This Rise of the Turk situation is really strong, because it also, once you blob enough, it basically gives you the ability to get claims on the Balkans with it. So yeah, you are definitely set up with claims. You have more councillors to be able to integrate anyway than other countries. I think you started with like, or you very early on get like 4 councillors, and then you just keep integrating it. While you're integrating it, you get positive events for integrating it as well. It's really, really the blob nation. If you want to learn how to blob, if you want to learn how to deal with that, I think the Ottomans are the perfect choice there. Nonetheless, I want to point out before we go into like how this initially went for the situation, I do want to mention that at the time, I didn't understand a really interesting element of the Ottomans. Let me just find a unit right here. We can see this right here. They have Akinçiler, which are very good high initiative units. And then we also, of course, have units that are the Janissaries. Here we have the Janissaries, right? This is a really interesting interplay that they have, because I think it is relatively unique. It doesn't make them ultra OP. I mean, they are really powerful because of the way that they need to blob to be historical, right? But the horses, basically, that they have are high initiative units, which means that you can trump anything that isn't really like a very professional army with those units, right? Obviously, because you come in early, you dunk on them, that's it. But then the Janissaries are actually really interesting, because they are directly countering other high initiative units. Take a look at this right here. I described this in the English video. I'm not going to do this again, but basically this means that they can withstand the very early on the battlefield being initiative units by saying, yes, I am coming in one by one, but I will be able to kind of take the beating for a while until all of my reinforcements come in, and then we got you. So this early professionalization makes it so, and I didn't realize this at the time of the playthrough because I didn't understand battles at the time. You basically have armies for different circumstances. The more professionalized your opponent is, the less will you be able to really just rush in with your horses. Obviously, they're still going to be there as a support unit, but your artillery becomes more important, and then the Janissaries just have this elite kind of capability of withstanding damage, which is huge to withstand hordes, for example, right? Your Janissaries can easily deal and dispatch hordes that definitely are around as well, because they come in with high initiative units, and then your high initiative units can deal with anybody that isn't a horde and isn't hyper-professionalized. So that is a really interesting interplay right there. In general, I think the Ottomans, despite me not enjoying it, let me just say this outright, at the time I wasn't enjoying it, but the Ottomans are in a very interesting, and I need to find it, kind of battlefield situation, right? If you take a look at this right here, fighting in France is so different from fighting in Anatolia, in the Balkans, and in the Near East. You know, we're talking primarily here, of course, about Georgia and such, because here, everything is hills, mountains, forests, you name it. In France, largely you have really nice open scapes, especially of course like in Aquitaine, and in the north it's very easy to maneuver, to navigate, to see, to understand. Here there are complexities there that make it difficult and different for you and for the AI. And I want to talk about this, of course, at length as well. I had my troubles with Warfare. This is why in the initial hours I was cursing a lot as I was playing. But basically, this is a completely different set, completely different area. It's really interesting. I didn't really appreciate it at the time, but I think that is something to consider. I myself, I think I blobbed into the Kandarids first, and the Germianids and the Karasids. This was pretty straightforward. They weren't really allied. I immediately got hit by a Byzantine coalition that did actually fire, and I struggled to get a white piece. I got really surprised by this. I pulled out a white piece at the end of it, or maybe I think I might have taken like some of these minor possessions that the Byzantines have in Anatolia, but they fired this. They wanted to contain me. It didn't work out. It did make it so that my relationship with the Byzantines was cooked from there on out. You can see right here, you can seek relations with with Byzantium, but they need to recognize you as the Lord of Anatolia, and they didn't like me, so they did not recognize me. Obviously, from there, I was constantly kind of going, you know, what can I absorb, where can I go? Again, this is the blobbing game right there, and the Ottomans start out in an interesting position, because where you blob over here, there are a lot of Greek pops. They are not accepted, and they are not tolerated, or maybe they aren't, maybe they are tolerated, I'm actually not sure. But what really matters there is you can't build armories there once you start professionalizing, and you are not really getting many levies from them, right? Your Turkish pops live over here, or you have to bring them in via, and I don't even think you can see it here, Turkic migrations. It's a cool feature. Turkic migrations let you kind of pull Turkic pops, you know, from other areas of the world into this region right here. I should have used that feature a lot more. I can tell you that in hindsight, and you're going to see this as well as I tell you about my tales in Greece, where I was like, yeah, this land is amazing, you know, it's connected to the ocean, that is so amazing. I will look at it and I will go, wow, check this out. I can easily govern it because my maritime presence will... No, the Greeks didn't like me, and there weren't too many Turks living there, so it was quite difficult. When it came to the age of tradition and the age of Renaissance, obviously, again, the Black Death hit us, was pretty significant, but then I moved on and I kept conquering. My two biggest counters were, in fact, the Arachnids and the Mamluks. The Mamluks were meddling with me a lot. They were very active in the politics of this region, and very powerful as well. The Mamluks are in an amazing position, really, at the game start, at least when it comes to their, like, economic setup. So they are pretty high literacy, they are pretty well positioned, because they have this powerhouse that is, of course, Egypt. Egypt is incredibly wealthy, comparatively to, you know, for example, Anatolia, and based on this, they were capable of fielding a very substantial professional army pretty early on. Which meant, yeah, I had wars where they joined against me, and I was just dodging them. I was skirting them. There was no way that I was fighting and winning against their professional army, you know, especially as I hadn't yet conquered all of this stuff. It was pretty tough. I liked it. That was nice. I did enjoy this. The Mamluks are an interesting factor there, because they are much more stable and much more significantly positioned than the Byzantines at the end of the day. I had an easier time beating the Byzantines, and the Arachnids, actually, and I'm not sure whether this is just in my playthrough or whether it is a general thing, they were a vassal, and I think it might just be a historical thing, of the horde of the Galearids, which is probably not how you pronounce it, but that was nasty, because the Galearids is essentially what you have in Mesopotamia, and they have a ton of vassals. All of these are all vassals. Oh my god, that is hell. I was skirting this. Obviously, in the first place, you can't really administer it. That is something that I was already understanding at the time. This land right here, at the very start for the Ottomans, uninteresting, because you can't really take control of it. You want to go around here, you get some special content as well for the, I think it's like mint, you know, mint areas right here, that you can utilize in Anatolia, that you really want to take care of, but all of this is Turkish land. All of this will give you levies and will strengthen you significantly, and all of this is reachable by sea, which is why you want it as well. These years of war were interesting. I had a difficult time again, because the game doesn't really communicate this kind of, that I talked about, right? The damage taken versus initiative equation that is so important, especially in the early years. I lost battles where I thought I should have won that. I took so much damage for battles where I thought I should have not taken that damage. It turns out I was getting initiative, basically, right? If everybody has horses and I don't have that many horses yet, that's what is going to happen. Nonetheless, there were a couple of interesting things here that I want to mention in that context. The Pope actually called a crusade for Anatolia that went through. This entire area basically turned Catholic. So literally, either the Pope held it directly, or there was somebody else involved. I think it might have been Genoa. They got land down there. And the people that didn't directly get taken over, it's this guy, for example. I don't remember the name. But the Sahib Ataids became Catholic. They just straight up became Catholic. So I had those sitting there for a while. I was not going to fight the Pope. The Pope had a lot of friends in this kind of Thunderdome that is Anatolia. You're going to find an enemy sooner than later. You also get a lot of events that are related to you expanding into particular areas, for example, Crimea, for example, into the Balkans and so on. Eventually you do this and you get that done. I don't want to talk about those wars because they were small. You mostly just blob, and then you assign your councillors to indeed integrate more areas. The situation itself, you definitely want to keep going for as long as you can, because once you blob enough, you also can get claims into the Balkans, and this is kind of where I want to give you a rough timeline. So I was gunning. This was my campaign goal. Everything I wanted to do was to blob at least as fast, if not faster, than the Ottomans did historically. By 1414, I had all of Greek, the again Greek side, except like Athens. This stuff was held there. The Mamluks were there, the Pope was there. It was nasty. I didn't want to mess with it, so Achaia basically escaped me. But everything here was me. In like 1420, I think, I take Constantinople, I move my capital. So I'm clearly earlier than I'm historically, but I definitely also earned it. I will tell you that. In general, I think I was roughly on pace with the historical blobbing of the Ottomans. After the initial blobbing in Anatolia and what you get, for example, for Crimea, that kind of stuff, I think you even get a claim on, like eastern or southeastern Italy. There you go. After that, I basically, it's kind of freeform, right? You just go in there and you just do what you gotta do and what you can do. I focused on this entire area and I still made many mistakes, which is super interesting looking back now. Basically, the Ottomans, in this period already, but even more afterwards, get a lot of cultural capacity, which means that you can have a lot of accepted cultures, and it is pretty cheap to do many of them. What I screwed up was you need to decide, are you going to be nice to the Greeks, and then they are willing to be a part of your empire, or are you not going to be nice to the Greeks, and then you need to have a lot of Turkic migrations in those regions, because the Greeks will never, ever become accepted. I had conquered all of this stuff, and it turns out here, and I kind of already noticed this, but I didn't really think too much of it. But I had conquered all of this stuff. I had annexed the Byzantines actually to trigger, the success event. This entire area here, and this was really interesting to see in the later stages of the game, was functionally worthless. The Greeks didn't want to give me any money. They didn't want to be administered despite great presence. Like here, for example, where I had settled more Turkish people, right? Thanks to Constantinople having direct maritime reach into this area, I had a very easy time getting taxes, converting these people, and so on. In Greece, the opposite. I didn't build anything in Greece. My entire powerhouse was Western Anatolia because these people did not like me and I didn't aggressively enough settle them to make that not matter. A really interesting dynamic. I definitely didn't play it the right way, quote unquote, but it is cool to see because I had these Greeks. Around 1700, Greek culture was basically diminishing significantly because they didn't have anybody that was keeping their culture alive, right? So if you don't keep their culture alive with a tag, what happens is their cultural tradition, there's like two values, and one is the attack and the defense value. Their defense value went down significantly. And the better I got at controlling them, because I got more centralized, despite them not liking me, the more did I make it so that Greek culture and Greek culture pops indeed diminished. A really interesting interplay right there, definitely not optimal. Idea is either you should make it so that the Byzantines kind of go, oh yeah, you know what, maybe this guy is the new Rome, and then all the Greeks go, okay, I'm going to agree with this, add them basically to the people that dominate the realm's administration. Blobbing-wise, and like I said, I didn't really get the interplay of the initiative and damage equation that I talked about last video. Blobbing-wise, I had a pretty bad time. I want to talk about this a little bit, because I think that was partially me just not knowing the mechanics, and then I sent in a slightly bigger army, and either I take many losses, or maybe I even lose that fight, right? I will tell you right now that the battles just didn't feel that good because it's not that clearly communicated what matters when and how. If you take a long look at the battles, you will learn it, and then you're like, oh yeah, this makes perfect. Of course I lost that battle. But at the time, it didn't feel good. What was much more significant for me, and I don't think that this is a systemic thing, I think it is a more complex thing of the way that combat in this game works. At the very start, I obviously didn't have a navy. I started building a navy soon after this problem emerged, but I am sad to say that this didn't stop the problem from happening. What I mean is that, let's say, for example, I fight the Karamanids. I want to take this territory right here. I expect that we are fighting in this general area. That is not really what was happening. The AI, and I understand what the logic is, but the AI essentially went, okay, wait a minute. So I could fight him there, or I am seeing that there aren't too many forts in this area, and because of this, I'm going to ship people over there, and then they did this so often that they would just ship, like, piecemeal of their units, of their troops, into territory that they thought was undefended, including, like, Greece. And even when I had a navy, maybe I just didn't have a big enough navy to really take control of the entire area, but basically, even when I had a navy and set it to hunt navies, they would still be able to do that, which was really annoying because it meant that I had to go clean that up and then come back down. And then once I was back down, they were like, hey, by the way, I re-raised my troops and I have another 2,000 troops right there. Is this a fundamental issue of this thing? No, I don't think so. It's like an adjustment is needed for the AI, at least when it comes, because this was never going to be a successful military expedition into the territory. I want to make this clear. Obviously, if you see a gap, if you see a way of splitting the enemy's troops, should do that. The AI here was sending people to die, basically, and was just wasting my time. It felt really, really awful. The other thing was basically the way that visibility works. There is a really high chance in this territory in general, because it is all hills, it is all mountains, it is all forest, that you will find yourself in a position where every time you proceed into a new province where you want to siege, because there's a fort there, you will be going into land that is completely invisible. This is such a cool idea, such a cool dynamic, and it really buffs one ability that I used extensively starting like 1500 with the Ottomans, where you do build a spy network so that the fog of war over your enemy is lifted, right? That is one of the abilities that you can do by infiltrating the administration. But if you don't do that, you're basically always walking in blind. And this is true for you and the AI. As a player, I will walk in blind with all my army. Best case scenario, I find an army, I defeat them. Worst case scenario, there's no army there, but I was safe. Whatever, right? The AI doesn't really think that way. This isn't, I don't really want to get lost too much in this, because I want to talk about this in another video. But I think it is difficult for the AI to evaluate this. Whereas in EU4, you didn't really have this system, right? In EU4, you could basically always, I think always, one tile, and then there was fog of war, rather than there's immediately fog of war. The fact that when the AI comes to siege one of my forts, they literally cannot see directly next to that fort is so dangerous for the AI, because what it means is that I can ambush them so easily, right? Yeah, so this is one of those things where I was like, this feels kind of, it feels weird, it feels really, really odd, and I think it has great upsides. I want to talk about this again in an extended video. Warfare here felt really weird, whereas in the 100 Years' War, it felt great. I liked the way it felt when visibility wasn't like this. There was a later instance when I was fighting a massive coalition of Catholics that I want to talk about then, where I was like, oh, I get it now. It's not the AI being stupid, it really is just that. We're gonna talk about that in just a second. Obviously, you can always make better AI, and it should be made better. This is such a complex system compared to what EU4 had, even including the C-zones. I mean, think about how tiny these C-zones are, and you only ever have vision into the next tile, right? Moving your transports, that is a lot of darkness that you're going into. Anyway, so the Age of Renaissance comes to a close. I have conquered Constantinople, I have taken over much of this area, and I'm turning towards the Mamluks, and I am turning towards other people in Europe. In the Age of Discovery, you get a ton of CBs as the Ottomans as well, and I don't really have any other images, by the way, for this particular section right here. In this particular age, I start pushing into the Mamluks. I am prepared. I couldn't have taken the Mamluks. There is no way that I could have taken the Mamluks until that point. I was cemented, I had taken over Constantinia, I was in a position where this area started to become Turkish, which makes it so that I can have armories, I can have more manpower, I can start professionalizing. I'm still very much poorer than the Mamluks, and the Mamluks have way more vassals than me, which is very powerful, right? But I, of course, am able to integrate a lot, I'm able to spread my culture a lot, and then to accept whoever I conquer as well quite easily. I start to push into the Mamluks, and that was a really interesting set of wars. It suffered significantly, again, from the fact that they kept shipping around their armies into, like, this area of Anatolia, when it's like, I am besieging your entire Levant, I am taking your access to other markets, I'm taking your important locations that lead me all the way to Cairo. I will then have free reign to go into Egypt, right? This is just one of those things where the AI, even when I had a bigger navy than them set to hunt navies, they would always get a couple of troops through. I even saw an issue where they they started walking from here and then ended up all over here, and it's like, man, it's like, are you sure you want to do this? This is bad for your supply. Yeah, I think they just favor going for unfortified locations way too much, because that doesn't really threaten me. If you're not going for my forts, I will still be safe. It's just kind of annoying, right? This is one of those things, again, they should address this, they should do something about the AI behavior, but this is just like, you just need to tell the AI to prioritize things slightly differently. This isn't like a fundamental issue. The wars here were super interesting, mostly because the Mamluks and I were the very first, or this was the first encounter that I had in the game and in this playthrough with a fully professionalized army. We still both were using levies, of course, as well, but we had big professionalized army corps as well. I mostly used the terrain to my advantage. I understood how to do this as well. You kind of start picking up on like where you hidden, where they hidden, when you need to be cautious, and so on. It's an interesting campaign. You start picking up on it there. At the time, of course, the council stuff gets a lot, like it gets a lot. People constantly die, you have to replace them, you have to, you know, send them to different locations, to different provinces, I should say, to integrate those provinces. It is a lot that is going on there. And It's one of those things that I can't really automate. I wish I could. I can automate replacing generals and admirals because giving those fleets then commands is separate as an automation setting. When it comes to the council, you can only automate the council fully or not at all. So I had to do a lot of clicking there. The content that I actually went through was pretty neat, especially the lower I went into the Mamluks, because you get content there basically where you start taking things over and they're like, oh, you sacked Cairo. Like that is where the last caliph, or where the disgraced Abbasids, I think, right? The caliphs are sitting. What do you do with them? And I think I took him out. I think so anyway. Then I was also, I took over Mecca and Medina, not directly, but as vassals, and you get an event for that as well. There's some nice flavor there for sure. I also went on to kind of secure Constantinia, and it is at this point that I realize I will never get the Greeks to accept me. This situation closes at the very latest at like 1565, because I blobbed more though, like I was a little bit bigger than the historical Ottomans. It closed to me at like 1510, 1520, right? So reasonable, okay, I lose this, but that means I can't invite any more Turkic migrations, and I didn't invite enough into Greece to kind of get rid of this. So yeah, the cultural opinion thing, and there were some questions after the English stuff as well. There are some things that are unclear to me, but fundamentally, cultural opinion is related to your relationship with the tag of that culture. If you destroy all culture tags and the opinion was negative, the opinion is going to be negative. I tried to circumvent this after I conquered Achaia. I made a vassal down there, but they weren't able to improve cultural opinion with me. In France, as England, my fiefdoms that were always like 1 to 3 provinces big, I made them relatively big, it looked aesthetic, I loved it. They were capable of doing this for these minor French cultures that are in the region, right? So I'm not sure why they couldn't do it with me. I think the Greek Achaeans, we had great relations, great trust, yada yada yada. I think they can't improve cultural opinion because they didn't hold the majority of Greek culture locations. I think that is the reason anyway. I have no idea, in particular. I know that other vassals of mine definitely were able to improve. Trebizond was able to improve. They are Pontic, and they improved my relations with me, and because of this, I could then later on obviously turn the Pontic culture into an accepted culture. But basically, I mostly was working with integration in this region. Trebizond was a vassal. I had a couple of other vassals. I don't really want to get too much into this. I blobbed all the way down to the Mamluks, and this was the natural route. I did this because I specifically had said to myself, let's blob like the Ottomans did it. In a way, and this is where it gets really interesting for me, this was a mistake. First of all, I do want to stress again, the Greeks made the entirety of the Greek lands to me completely useless. Because, they just didn't like me. Secondarily, I thought not enough at all about why this route of blobbing would be logical for me. It would be logical, but I forwent a lot of money as a consequence of this. My entire income, quite frankly, is carried by the fact that I had taken Egypt and that I was able to have the Egyptian culture be accepted. They were friendly with me. And then just literally live off that breadbasket. It was an amazing story that I at the time didn't realize, but essentially, most of my money that isn't taxes, and taxes you kind of want to tweak every now and again in case the states get angry, that kind of stuff, most of the money I made came from me selling sugar to Europe. Obviously, that source of income, historically speaking, becomes much less prominent once the Europeans go to the Americas, and they pick up alternative sources for this, right? They're able to do it themselves, but that never happened because of the 2 bugs that I talked about in the last video, which meant I had good income. This was accidental. I didn't do this. So I got lucky. I will also say I took Crimea, not understanding that I probably wanted Crimea so that I have actual market access, that I can do stuff and then grab pelts from further north, right? I obviously wanted to do this, but I didn't realize it. In this playthrough, and this is now the... So just to reiterate, in 1420 or so, I get Constantinople, then I keep blobbing, I take Egypt. In like the 1520s, I'm pretty much set up. I have Bulgaria half conquered, half as a vassal, Serbia fully as a vassal, I had Albania as a vassal. It's like a special interaction thing. That guy rebelled against me. I believe this was like a Skanderbeg-like kind of rebellion. Cool stuff. I destroyed them. Obviously, how dare you. I also had a personal union with Tunis and Morocco eventually, which I was the senior partner in, so capable of annexing them, but I had no intention to annex them. I mostly was like, nice map painting. I love to see it. What happened here, if we want to evaluate the Age of Discovery from that angle, is that I blobbed at roughly the pace of the historical Ottomans. I got super lucky with my income because Egypt paid for everything, and together, of course, with the Bosporus tolls right there that you collect there, right? But I didn't actually play the game well. And I want to stress this because it's kind of like, it's a really interesting thing. I've thought about this a lot more now with the video and me reading your comments. I was applying kind of like board game logic. me blobbing is always good. Realistically speaking, having control isn't everything, right? I told you a lot about the trade game, and I made a big mistake, but it's a super interesting one in the later stage of this playthrough as well. I wasn't playing the trade game at all. I got lucky that the trade game kind of just works, and that they're all like, yeah, we would love your sugar coming from Egypt, and I think partially the Levant, we would love that sugar in Europe. I was like, okay, yeah, I didn't do anything about this. I got entirely lucky. Really, really interesting to see, but I definitely blobbed more on an abstract level, because this was my first playthrough after the tutorial. I was more kind of board game minded than I think I should have been. There's more to this game than just, yeah, obviously this is the blobbing route. Anyway, the last interesting thing that I want to mention from the Age of Discovery is related to a regency. I had my Sultan die without a male heir. He had plenty of girls, but no male heirs. I became an indefinite regency of the aristocracy, and this regency of the aristocracy was basically, yeah, it was sitting there. I had a very competent first regent, and I probably should have turned him into the actual ruler, but he was not, very much not, an Osman. I still had a bunch of Osmanolu. I think, and I'm not so sure about this, that eventually one of my boys, my Osmanolu boys, would have grown up in a distant kind of family branch, would have grown up to be 16, and then they would have called upon him to become Sultan. I got lucky. It was really funny. It's a bit of a weird one, but I enjoyed it. I think this added to the gameplay experience, especially because I later on had a female harem dominate my politics, you know, flavor stuff. The second regent that I had was a daughter of the deceased Sultan, and she seized power. I had her seize power. And she was a very successful sultana. She had previously, although he was then deceased, married actually inside of the family, and she had boys that were of the right family, and so the Osmanolu dynasty continued. It's just that, you know, technically it was of the male branch of the other part of the Osmanolu. Doesn't really matter. There was interesting content as well. So we then enter the Age of Reformation, and in the Age of Reformation, there are the most interesting external political things that I have done that were largely failures, okay? I was professionalizing my army, of course. I was doing quite well. I was floating on the money coming in from the sugar trade, which I was soundly unaware of. I was, in the Age of Reformation, firmly in control of every single system in the game but trade. I did the production methods. I can tell you that I would always recommend this as well. If you start a campaign very early on into your EU5 playtime, learn the production methods, like literally just click on all the buildings, check out what they do. You don't need to memorize them too much, and you can automate them later if you want to. I personally leave them de-automated. But basically, some buildings use slightly different sub-products, and then you can specialize what you want to prioritize in your market. I like that. I will tell you, knowing production methods without studying trade and using trade properly, kind of useless, so I would want to do those in tandem, but at the time I was thinking trade, I will never de-automate, right? Basically, the idea was I was doing my production methods, I was building up my economy. I noticed at that point then that I had made a huge mistake in Greece, and I can tell you that, like, in 1700, large areas of Greece were basically depopulated. They all fled elsewhere. They went into different areas because I didn't build in Greece. I didn't do anything there. It was useless land for me. I couldn't control it. They didn't like me. I didn't care for it. Nope, not bothering with this, right? We have the area around Constantinople. We have the area on the western coast of Anatolia thriving, becoming incredibly wealthy, of course, because I'm actually building those up. They are Turkish. They are very willing to accept my rule, right? As simple as that is. And yeah, so I built them up, and in the late game, you can see that actually Achaia is the only part of kind of Greek Greece, I guess, that is actually in a position of being wealthy, because those were built up. They had power holders that, you know, kind of put something in there. I had a vassal in Achaia for a while. Really interesting to see, especially towards the late game then. Now, what I did afterwards was I said to myself, hey, it's time to blob into Europe, baby. I was just finishing off the Mamluks. Obviously, they still existed, but they were like splinters in Arabia somewhere, right? All the important lands were in my possession, and I held them directly as well because I was pretty good with my maritime controls. So that was something I was doing there. And I decided, let's get some war going. And you can see it right here, actually. I was fighting, my God. So there was a personal union between Hungary and Poland. They were fighting me. The Pope came in. We had a bunch of the Italians come in. I think Austria was also there. That was a fight, and it was a lot of fun. And I can tell you, and again, obviously you have now heard of my woes, my mismanagements of my realm. That was a fight where I think I inched out like this coastline. So you have to imagine all of Serbia here is my vassal, right? We're mostly fighting on Serbian lands. It's close battles. I don't really understand the battle system at the time. I secure this land right here. This was miserable. This was the most fun, just for the record, that I probably had as the Ottomans fighting wars, because fighting here is really interesting. There's a lot of mountains there, a lot of visibility issues. I didn't push any further. I only took this land because I said, oh my god, I burned so much money, I burned so much of my effort and my manpower and everything in this location. I'm just going to be happy that I can go back home to Constantinople, say, look at me, I secured this strip of land right there, right? It was not a lot of land for the amount of conflict, for the people that I lost, etc. But it was fun. It was really, really fun. What I noticed here, and I want to highlight this, because this is one of those things where I think players that are interfacing with this game for the first time, they're going to be like, this AI is the dumbest AI I've ever seen. And it's not actually true, okay? Let me correct this. It is kind of true. The AI will be worse than you. Okay, this is just the way the cookie crumbles in grand strategy games. I was besieging a fort right here, and in the backdrop, I obviously had parked a couple of units, as you do. The enemy came from over here. This was enemy territory, right? And they were walking like this towards the fort. They could have taken the army in the fort, I think. They were big enough for that. And they saw the fort, obviously, because it was their fort. And they just walked into my reinforcements and died. Like, my reinforcements were like 20,000 men standing there, and they were like, yeah, I'm gonna send my 8k and then I'm gonna die. And I was like, this is the dumbest AI I've ever seen. It turns out, and this is not that easy to see for the player, and it is obviously very difficult to handle for the AI. It turns out that my reinforcements, because everything here is mountains and hills, were standing in hills. So what happened was, I was standing there, and unbeknownst to me, because I hadn't realized it at the time, I was hidden. They didn't just walk into me, seeing I and being like, oh yeah, you know, let's die. They were like, I don't know, like, I have to relieve that siege, I'm gonna head there, and then we're gonna see how it goes. And this reveals two things. First of all, I think, and this is something, I don't share this opinion anymore, but I shared it at the time when this happened. I think there is a good chance that people will, like, have an experience like this, won't be really aware that they were hidden, that there were particular rules being applied that they were unaware of, because the rules are so complex and you don't always get all the information to understand all the rules at all times. I think there might be a sentiment where people go like, this AI is like unbelievably stupid. And I don't think that's true. Again, improvement is always feasible. I was sitting there dumbfounded until I realized, oh, that's what it was. And I think that might be something that people hold against the game when they are playing it. That is, well, obviously, was it the smartest move to move into a province that you didn't see? No, it really, really wasn't. But realistically speaking, it was not nearly as stupid as it seems at the time. And the secondary thing is that the rules of combat in EU5 are a ton more complex than the rules of combat in EU4. And this will natively make it so that the AI will have a tougher time. This is just a fact. I don't think we can get around this. You wouldn't want to know how often in this area or in Georgia I got trapped in a mountain for 6 months. Because I forgot, oh, it's gonna be winter, this mountain won't let me leave, and then I'm just gonna be stuck there with this. It happened to me so often. I have to assume it happens to the AI all the time. I didn't notice that much because I was more concerned about me screwing up all the time. I think the rules are more complex than ever, and I think that in very complex locations, this will be felt more. If you fight in France, you won't nearly as often feel this, because the AI doesn't need to be bothered with that many rules all the time. It's not everywhere where you siege in France, you also have every other province hidden around you because they're all mountains, hills, or forests, or whatever it is, right? Here in the Balkans, in Anatolia, that's the case. So you're gonna see that a lot. My Ottoman campaign was frustrating because I didn't understand half the time when I got screwed over or when the AI did something stupid. I think it's not the AI being like in a... The AI isn't nearly as stupid as it feels, basically. That's all I can say. It's just the complex rules here they've increased tenfold. I think for multiplayer, this is amazing. I think the AI probably be changed, obviously, you know, like to kind of take this more into account, and it will be changed over time, of course. AI will get better. This is the golden rule. But I think on a fundamental level, I think the AI right now needs to prioritize getting like infiltrate administration so that they lift fog of war and can see, okay? Because it's a game mechanic and it's a really useful one. Yeah, it's chaos, let me tell you this. So I expanded there. This war was crazy. It was a really fun war. I had a great time. I went home with only like a little bit of a benefit there because, yeah, this was a Christian coalition. I don't think it was a literal coalition against me, but they were all allied. They saw me coming and they were like, we're going in there, we're beating the hell out of this guy. They didn't. They gave me a really good fight. I was also pushing into Mesopotamia, and this is now away from warfare, so this was basically my warfare Ottoman experience right there, right? So let's put warfare aside for a second. Obviously, I did a lot of warfare. This is what you do as the Ottomans, right? Should be obvious. If you blob a lot, you do a lot of warfare. I was in a good position. I had secured, luckily, Egypt. I was in a position where I had mostly taken down the enemies that could have come for me. I had Tunisia and Morocco in a PU where I was the senior partner. Later on, actually, I think in the early stages of Absolutism, I annexed Tunisia. It was fine, yeah. It was nice. I liked the interplay right there. They were decent vassals. This right here is where I made a really drastic... This map, I don't know how accurate it is. I don't really care. Don't worry about it, okay? What I want to focus on was a strategic mismanagement, because I played the game like a board game. Unironically, this was my downfall here, of Mesopotamia. I conquered Mesopotamia bit by bit, and I did the classic thing, because I am so far away from Mesopotamia, I'm not administering you. I handed it over to, 2 or 3 province, maybe even bigger, large kind of vassals, right? Oh, actually, you know what? Actually, I think most of my vassals in most of my playthroughs were like, I want to say 2 to 5 provinces. I don't make them too small, because their control reach is fine, they look cute, I love it. Mesopotamia, being neglected the way that I neglected it, was really dumb by me. It was really, really stupid. Obviously, Mesopotamia has a huge potential. This is the crescent, right? This is the way it works. The Fertile Crescent, you can have a lot of stuff going on there. It's just that they have fallen out of favor. What I realized very quickly, as I was conquering this territory right here, was that I didn't want to dip too deep into Georgia, didn't want to bother, because Georgia was miserable to fight in, so many mountains. It was going to be a long and arduous campaign, which is great news, by the way, if you are somebody that wants to play Georgia, I think. There really is like a cost where you go, I'm not going to bother doing this. I had the same reaction once I reached it, so I think all of this was basically Ottoman Mesopotamia with Iran. I was like, I am not going deeper. I am happy that I secured this stuff right here. These mountains, you can keep them. I will tell you that strategic mismanagement here is completely unrelated to warfare. The decisions that I made there were intuitively correct. Practically speaking, were nonsense. What I mean here is that in the age of Reformation and in the age of Absolutism, I started focusing on exploration and exploring both India and the New World. I will tell you right now, if you colonize the New World as the Ottomans, really think about it. I find it's really interesting. I reached it and I colonized a little bit, and I didn't realize it at the time. Because I didn't realize many things at the time. When I trade with my New World market, and I want to enrich my market, I want to make my pops happier, so that I get a higher everything, basically, right? I am trading through Gibraltar. Every goddamn export that I bring back home gives money to the Spanish. I realized this when I looked at it later. I was like, whoa, that is what you're doing there. You can easily get cut off, of course. I mean, I was friends with Morocco and Tunisia, but you will want to secure Gibraltar. I paid them so much in tolls, and I realized it only later. We were talking about so much money, seriously. Really interesting, really cool. The other side of the coin kind of is, if you do go for the New World, you actually benefit from the fact that you already practice slavery. You don't even need to grab West Africa. You can just straight up bring slaves from, be it Morocco, Tunisia, or be it your own slaves in your own core territory, right? It's a really interesting dynamic, because there are incentives. This means that you can, after your sugar trade becomes less impactful, because in the New World you can also have sugar, you can have various other things that can replace sugar. You can still kind of try to at least be a player in that game by being in the New World yourself. It's a really interesting angle. I didn't really do much there, and then I fell into my own trap, because I didn't do anything with Mesopotamia. I set them up to be my hinterlands, which you will now notice is a theme of this playthrough. Western Anatolia, Eastern Greece, and Egypt were my prime lands, and everything else became hinterlands. They were not doing so hot. Again, the Greeks really hated me. Mesopotamia would have / should have been my gate to India. But because of the way that I had organized it, because of the way that I had completely neglected it, and because of the way I had vassals there, and the vassals were kind of doing like so-so, I didn't have a gate to India. This is a difficulty when we talk about trade with India. You can reach it, technically speaking, through Egypt, of course, but you want to be doing it through a strong Mesopotamian market. It is the shortest route. You can have a second, basically, hub in this region right there. I failed to do that. And the consequence is that I basically didn't benefit from India nearly as much as I should have had, not to mention that I tackled India the wrong way. We're talking about like 1600 or so. When I am in India, I colonize these islands right there to get a very baseline base, basically, right? I want some influence there. And I can tell you now, in hindsight, and after understanding the New World routine that exists from emerging from systems, so we're back in this discussion now, I tackled India the completely wrong way. I tackled India in a land-grabbing way. I established, actually, a colony in this general area, and then not a colony, but an Indian vassal state in this area. No need. This was complete nonsense. India has a lot of population. India is not nearly behind in tech. They have access to a ton more things like horses, that kind of stuff. Elephants, obviously, sure. They can fight. They got hands, okay? The amount that I invested in subduing these parts of India was so bad in comparison to what I could have done instead. I think the way you want to play India is the way that you historically want to play. So just for the record, and it is funny, I still like it. I had a colony here when I ended the game in like 1700, right? When I was like, I screwed this up so much, I want to do something else. I came in here, I conquered this, then I organized, I amassed my troops, and I pushed in here. I tried to go for the weakest one, I started to take it, I pushed in there, they gave me a lot of resistance. Hoysala and Vijayanagar, they just absolutely, they had big armies, they had local armies, they had professional troops. Obviously, I was ahead, because I was very, like, technologically developed as well. But in general, yeah, they were giving me a hard time. Orissa also actually was massive at the time already. So I was taking land here, and I gave it a part of it to the colony. I can tell you in 1700 there were a lot of Turkish pops living in the colony because it gets treated like a colony, right? I would never do this again. There are two angles that I want to stress, and I think India, the same way that the New World comes in waves, where systemically you can easily tackle and blob into the New World, into existing tags at the very start when you find it, and then afterwards you have to have the infrastructure built up to bring more troops over, or it's not going to work out. In India, you start on the level of, hey, probably don't want to blob here too much. You can do it, you're gonna pull it off. It's gonna cost you so much more, and the benefit isn't that big. Let me present it this way. Towards the tail end of the Age of Reformation, I explore all of this, I take these islands, I take my colony right here. What is the actual benefit I get out of it? Not much. Do they pay me taxes? Do I get, of course, they're trading locally, blah, blah, blah. Yes, that is completely correct. In the Age of Absolutism, though, did that do anything for me the way that the transatlantic trade that I described in the English game for me in England? Absolutely not. It's a really funny story, the analysis there that followed. I took that land because I said to myself, well, I could do New World, but I want to like see India, I want to see where it goes. And then I had no way to actually integrate the flow of goods, to integrate the benefits that I can derive from India into my actual empire. I didn't think about this at all. I had board game brain thinking. This is the way that I would describe it, okay? I took this land and I was like, all right, give me money. And there's a lot of people living there, so they paid me money. I hopped into this save game earlier today, and I said to myself, my God, what the hell was I doing? What goods can I even get from here that I really care for? And I looked at it. So you can get pepper, and then further east you can get tea, right? You can also get cloves, I think, in Indonesia, right? Those are the goods that you want. Now you need to know something about those goods. Those goods, at least as far as I can tell right now, and maybe I'm gonna come back on this and eat my words. Maybe I'm just misreading it. I don't think you can build buildings for that stuff. I think it is exclusively RGOs, which means your control of this area is for a lot less trade that is of very high quality. If you get my meaning, as long as I had even one port here and was able to dominate this region and get beneficial treatment, trade advantage, I build overseas trade ports in territory that I don't even own, I can take the small amount of what they are producing, the pepper, the cloves and whatnot, I can bring them into my territory. I don't need to wage all these wars. I don't need to have a colony here. I can literally do a Portugal, facilitate this. Now the other thing, and this is super, the systemic stuff of this, I love it so much. Since I didn't have a good port that I built up, Egypt, it's not that easy to get your stuff into Egypt from here because Egypt is obviously facing towards the Mediterranean. The way this functioned for me was that the ideal port to bring this to, if I didn't want to go via Africa all around, right? And then of course you come via Gibraltar and all of a sudden, hey, Gibraltar, you're paying the Spanish again money, would have been via Mesopotamia. It would have been via Mesopotamia, but Mesopotamia was in shambles. I didn't build it up at all. So the ideal play, or the play basically that makes a lot of sense in my head right here and that I want to play out at some point, was to make Mesopotamia, in one way or another, into a powerhouse, to mostly use trade companies in this area, have them generate trade advantage, and then with all of that, push what few items I want, because again, the amount that you get out of just RGOs versus plantations that you built in the New World, it's a massive difference, right? But the way that I saw it was, everything I took here, listen, it's funny, again, this was a Turkish colony in Ceylon and in southeast, basically Tamil, right? Yeah, they were paying me some money, they were doing well. Again, a lot of Turkish people living here. It was cool to look at. I love doing that. That's really cool. But on a purely economic point of view, which was the reason that I came here, what I was doing was utter nonsense. I didn't need to dominate these people here, especially with how well they could fight back. You want to do that later, just for the record. Obviously, this is the idea. Later on, the moment that you have strong infrastructure here, the moment that your trade range and your fleet range and your actual capability of maintaining an empire has increased, so we're talking like 1740, 1750, take India. Go in, take Indian land, big one, right? But the biggest amount of money that I could have gotten from this area without actually needing to go in and spend a lot of money on getting it would have been, you just take a couple of provinces at most, you start trade companies right here, you take their trade advantage, you make sure that you dominate this area, you build buildings right here to allow yourself to kind of get maritime presence, right? Maybe you even create a new market center. I did that, of course. And then you go out of your way and say, hey, and now with all that being done, I can take all of your cloves, I can bring it even, you know, from Indonesia, I bring the cloves here, and then I transport all of that stuff into Mesopotamia. I can already see that you, as Portugal, you can easily benefit a ton off of India without holding too much land, because all you need is just the influence to bring very few items that are of extremely high value back to Europe. This is one of those things I didn't pick this up because I didn't learn trade at the time. I had learned production methods, and that was what I had picked up on. Super cool. When I realized that this routine in India is the historical routine rather than land grabs and much, you know, big administrative units, I really liked it. I think that is awesome. I'm gonna try that for sure with a country soon-ish, right? I want to take a look at the Indian trade and how much it differs, because obviously it differs from the Ottoman experience, or rather, sorry, from the New World experience. I would also say, again, as the Ottomans, you can clearly go through Gibraltar, but you need to secure Gibraltar, because otherwise you're paying Spain so much money for no reason whatsoever, which is a historical concern. If I look at what I did in India, and how much resources I spent in India, and how much I sailed my boats from the Mediterranean around the Cape of Africa, and then to India, just to secure some dominance over there, I would have much rather pushed further into Europe, where I know they have wealth, where I know I can kind of like push into them. It's a prestige thing, of course, and I can dominate my opponents and weaken them wherever I can. I would have like, you know, my resource distribution was fully misaligned. I like this a lot. You have very soft type of colonization and imperialism here because you don't want to dominate people that cost you so much to take them over. What a grand design. Seriously, the Indians, they got hands, by the way. They really, really do, which at the time I didn't understand. Because again, I didn't understand combat, really. I understand it after the England campaign. But basically, yeah, all I can say is, so basically I handled that poorly, but that is a super interesting equation that you have right here, because what it indeed means is that you can sit down and you can play it lighter, you can be Portugal, you can be a smaller country, and you will be able to extract most of the wealth as long as you work with trade companies, and then indeed have like a little hub where you can also, you know, have your own navy secure your trade advantage. Really cool stuff. Let's go back home for the last thing about the Ottomans, which really screwed me, which is where I abandoned this playthrough. I want to talk just a little bit about my experience with Absolutism as the Ottomans. Absolutism, obviously, you want to, you know, have crown power, be incredibly powerful. You want to kind of dislodge the estates, which in the Ottomans actually played out really interesting because you have a flavor rebellion. Imagine I am basically all of this, right? Like, I got this lying around. These are, Tunisia is being annexed. Morocco is indeed my friend. This is a very old map. Don't worry about these borders too much. Doesn't really matter. I didn't push in much more over here. Didn't push in much in over there. I had a couple of colonies over here, and then indeed this Turkish colony over there, which was just very cute. But I screwed up, and seriously, like this, man, Mesopotamia could have been such a blooming kind of economy had I done it correctly and made them the gateway into the Indian Ocean. Anyway, in the Absolutism period, I kind of screwed up because I hadn't set myself up for it, which is good. This was exciting gameplay. I enjoyed it. The idea of it basically being that as I was sliding, there's a disaster. It is called, I think, it is called Court and Country. That disaster describes the power struggle between the central authority and the decentralizing authority. I very clearly went for like liberalism as England, but in this one I was like, I want to go absolutism. I managed to do it, but it took me a while, and I struggled through it, of course. This was interesting because it directly coincided with the Little Ice Age, and I did not have enough food in my area here, which meant that I had starving areas in Anatolia. This meant that I had to buy food through my budget. I was spending a lot of money. And I hadn't exactly made a lot of money with my expedition to India because I was being an idiot that hadn't set everything up. I love that so much. I was carried in that game thanks to Egypt having so much sugar and the Europeans not making it to the Americas. You can imagine on a systemic level, I got really, really lucky by the fact that the Europeans failed to really kind of consolidate on this because of the bugs that I talked about, right? This gave me a long-term good economic situation. Had they managed to get access to these resources properly, this would have declined in income. I would have not had a good time. I already had a bad time. Now, what is cool though, because I had a bad time, the Little Ice Age, and because of Court and Country, both of these made it possible for a disaster to trigger that was the Janissary coup. They wanted to coup my sultan, and I said no. I could have just given in, and I believe that is what historically happened, but I said no, and so I had this massive rebellion happening there. That was also then the only one that let me get through this absolutism situation with court and country, because I had smashed them. But that was a big battle, a big war, I should say. They took most of my core area right here in central Anatolia. Luckily, I was set up for that one conflict. Not that it was an easy conflict at all, but basically, what I want to tell you about this playthrough and about why I abandoned this playthrough is I looked at this afterwards and was like, okay, I understand PMs now, I understand like a bunch of stuff. I need to apply it to a new situation. And that brings me then to yesterday's video, the 100 Years' War to England, where I finally understood so many things, and where I then was like, oh my god, I could have been rich in India, I could have been rich with Mesopotamia, but instead I looked at this as like garbage land, and I said, this is my core territory. Well, the Greeks, of course, over here were like, your core territory. I beg to differ, which meant that I was not really getting anything out of this one. Super suboptimally played Ottomans. I think the AI, especially France, they easily won the 100 Years' War. This one was still quite competitive, but that's not really neither here nor there. As I now was made to analyze what this playthrough actually was like, on a systemic level, it was a total failure on my part, right? Think about everything that I gave you to describe to you, my random push into the New World, because that's just what you do when you blob. My push into Crimea without facilitating trade, that's just what you take, you know, you want the Black Sea under control. My actual push over here and then immediately going, that's not worth it, while then also pushing into India instead of soft pushing into them. Yeah, it was really fun. I had a good time in most parts of this playthrough anyway. But man, the systems are something that I didn't value enough, and I would recommend that you value them when you play this game, because they are so cool to interact with. Had I realized this, I could have had much more soft power, I could have expanded much more easily into this general area, and then started properly trading, right? Instead of sinking so much money and troops in this area right there. Super interesting. This was everything for the Ottomans right here. Like I said, I already teased it now a little bit. There is, of course, going to be 2 videos on everything I dislike about EU5, and then there's going to be a video answering just questions. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. I hope so are you. Take everything lightly. Listen, go outside after watching this video. Have a good day, and consider what I told you about the systems. I'm going to leave you right here, and I will see you later. Alligator.